Testing. Testing. 1, 2, 3.
All right.
We can hear you.
Ian,
All right,
Hi,
guys.
thanks.
should we start?
Um, yeah. So thanks everyone for joining. These community AMAs are something we're going to try and do on a monthly cadence, just to get better community feedback and more active engagement in the governance process. So today we have Camille, who's a community member who organized the forum post, Ryan Park, the core developer for Anchor, Matt Canty, GM of Anchor, and Ian Holzman, the CTO of Anchor. So on that note, I'm going to pass it over to Camille, who's going to run through the agenda. We're going to do some back and forth with the Anchor team, and then we're going to open it up to questions.
All right. Thanks so much, Brian. And it's cool to see, I think, over 150 people now joining this space. I think if you followed the Anchor Twitter account and the Anchor forum, you may have seen the threads that I created. There's a master thread of the AMA where everybody was able to do questions for the last 2 weeks or so. And then there are also two other threads focused. One is focused around borrowing, and one is focused around increasing the value of the ANC token. And so the hope is to get through to cover all of that in this conversation. So yeah, Ryan, Matt, and Ian, how are you guys doing?
Good.
Great. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's good.
Good stuff. So yeah, Brian already did a little bit of an intro as to who you guys are. So I think that part is covered, and I think maybe as to expand a little bit on that, I think it would be great to hear from you guys more broadly what the current priorities for you are. What are the main things that are happening at Anchor? What are the things that you're building? What are the challenges? And yeah, just as a general overview of what's happening right now. Maybe Matt?
Yeah, sure. I'm Matt Cantieri. I joined Anchor at the beginning of the year as general manager, so lead adoption of the platform as well as own the overall kind of commercial and product success of Anchor. And look, ultimately we want Anchor to be the best high yield savings protocol on Terra, obviously, and then on every other chain as well. TradFi savings are non-existent, as everybody knows, and other lending protocols have yields that may be high one day and kind of zero the next. So I think the opportunity set here is massive in terms of both mainstream world and within DeFi. And I think DeFi is what we have to really solve first, because I don't think you can have mainstream success without first having significant buy-in from DeFi power users like you all. So in terms of like Anchor priorities, which is I think what you're kind of asking, I think first of all it's important to kind of step back and remember that we are a decentralized protocol, not some centralized Silicon Valley startup. Like I can't emphasize enough that you guys are every bit as we are, and we want to take the best ideas out there and build them into Anchor. So from today onward, you can mark the date, like it's October 28th or whatever. We're committing to be very active and respond on all Anchor community channels, forums, and beyond. If you leave this AMA with one message, I want it to be that we are starting a journey today, really, to be really open and collaborative with the community, and we're going to put SLAs in place for ourselves where we acknowledge and respond to your questions and proposals within 3-4 days. We're going to build governance in such a way that implementable ideas with community buy-in will actually get implemented in a reasonable time frame, and we're going to give progress updates with regard to those implementations. If you don't like our answers, you can tell us about it, but you won't be in the dark, and you will be heard. So priorities are organic, with input and influence from us, the people who think about Anchor every day, and then we're going to help craft and refine proposals, and then mobilize around adding them to the queue moving up the priority list, those that are deemed critical and needle moving to the community. Our priorities are probably going to diverge from the communities from time to time, and that's fine, right? But right now, I think my priorities are how do we make Anchor bulletproof as a protocol and performant in all markets? How do we add in increasing levels of borrow? How do we think about ways to improve tokenomics and value capture? And I'd say your feedback, has not fallen on deaf ears at all, even though sometimes we don't do a good enough job acknowledging that. And again, that changes today. So I'd say, we at Anchor also need to put forth our own proposals on a kind of more regular basis, like a couple deeply vetted ideas per month that you can attack or promote. And likewise, we'll be listing our core priorities regularly to help, kind of shape future conversations. And I think then you asked about challenges. There's always massive challenges when you're building something this important at this scale. Securing the platform, keeping up with the pace of play of other protocols that want to plug into or build on top of Anchor, prioritization of features, ignoring bright, shiny objects, hiring the best smart contract and infra engineers on the planet, improving governance so that you all feel heard and there's actual engaged community, putting Anchor's growth. There's always going to be massive changes. It's a moving target, but they morph over time. And I can let Ian and Ryan get into specific top cover in terms of priorities and challenges, but just want to give you that high level about how I think about this stuff and how I think things should move going forward. And I think if we do a good enough job with protocol governance in terms of collaboration, responsiveness, and proactive proposal sharing, I think the best ideas are going to coalesce here and get launched. So Ryan, if you want to kick in with anything regarding your priorities or what you see as short-term challenges, chime in for sure.
Cool. That sounds good. Yeah, maybe Ryan. I think you've been at Anchor longer than pretty much anyone. So what's your perspective on what's going on and priorities right now?
Yeah, I think so. Just as a quick intro, I've been around Anchor for quite a while, like about a year and a half now. So being here since the start, designed the initial mechanisms, did like the technical specs, and yeah, I'd say like our priorities, like looking at the forum posts and the discussions going around there, a lot of the priorities of the community is also co-aligned with us. So we're trying to solve the borrowing demand issue. Not really too much of an issue, but like more borrowing is always good. And also ANC value, like it's a protocol token, so we're also having a focus on that. So yeah, I think we could go ahead with some of the discussions. If Ian has anything else to bring up, I think he can just bring them up.
For me, my main focus is hiring at the moment. So if you know any Rust developers, please send them my way.
Sounds good. All right. With that said, let's get to the questions from the. And if you guys open the thread on the Anchor forum or all three threads, you'll see that there's a lot of really great contributions. What I did before the call was I went through everything and sort of summarized it and made it a little bit more concise so that we can get through as many ideas as possible. So I think we can start going through the questions in the AMA thread right now, and from the panelists, maybe whoever thinks that the question sort of pertains to their area of responsibility the most, maybe could just start to answer. Okay. So just going from the top of the AMA thread on the forum. Let's see. So there's a question around implementation of all these threads. I think it would be good to have a very quick discussion as to how actually things happen in Anchor. So there's all kinds of ideas being suggested. Can the community, develop stuff by itself, or is it mostly Ian's Rust developers that are going to do all of that work actually, or how does it typically happen?
So since you named me, typically we take contributions from everybody. What we then do is, we vet them, we test them to make sure that they work in there. I mean, code talks and patches and all that are always welcome, but typically what we find is the developers on staff are the ones doing most of the work. Because they're in it neck deep all the time, and it is their day job, so to speak. But we always take contributions, we always read them, and we try to add as much as we can, if not the actual patch, but the idea behind the patch.
Cool, and that can come basically in the form of pull requests on the on Anchor's GitHub, and that's
And one of the other key messages here is it's very, from where we sit, people tweet ideas to different people in the metaverse, and it's challenging just keeping up with a lot of them. So, if you do have a good idea or something like that, sticking on Agora or something like that, if I basically decide to go skiing for a day, I'm not going to, miss out or not see it. Just something a little bit more long-lived than Twitter would be fantastic on some of these things.
Sounds good. Yeah, the two forum sites to bookmark are agora.terra.money. It's more general stuff around Terra. And then there's also forum.anchorprotocol.com. All right. Next question. Knowing that the 20% APY in the USD earns in sustainable very long term, what is your percentage goal ultimately? So the APY, the depositor APY, over time tend to?
I'd probably let Ryan go into this in more detail, but I've touched on this in a couple podcasts, and I'm open to being wrong too. My view is that 20% is kind of the ceiling here. It's the published rate when we launched. But overall, I'd like some margin to play with, especially when you consider that our file is so much better than everything else out there, like by a mile. And it's like why lock yourself, make yourself really rigid when you're so much higher and more stable than other protocols. So my governing kind of principle here going forward is sustainability. And I really want the community to debate where they think the yield should be. And my view, again, is we want flexibility and breathing room to kind of mitigate adverse market conditions. And I don't think people are necessarily going to head for the exits if APY comes down a little bit, especially with community voting and a few months of heads up. But I think Ryan's got some thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, so if you do like a fundamental analysis of the current system, like now we have Anchor that offers 20% yield. You're able to move in funds, move out funds at an instant. And there's like other protocols where you could borrow at preferably interest rates below 20%. So we have a system where this constant arbitrage can occur. And obviously, if you know a little bit of economics, it's not going to last forever. So like our path, but I guess we would still be offering yields much higher than the market rate. And then our path would be to, like, you could be implementing deposit terms. You could be implementing like requirements for depositors to earn high yield. And for example, like if you just natively just stake UST, if you just natively deposit UST into the system, you could be earning a lower yield, for example, 10%. That's just an example number. But if you lock up your funds for a longer term, then you could be accessing like 15, 17%. And I believe this is like always a way to go. I know a lot of people hate banks, but there's actually a lot to learn from their mechanisms. And the fact that they have deposit terms, and if you lock up your money in savings for a longer period, you get to high yields. I think Anchor would also be implementing a similar structure there. So all in all, yields, I believe it should go down, but it's still going to be above market rates. And by having further mechanisms such as deposit terms or requiring ANC to have a large amount of deposits, there's a lot of vectors that we could be highly superior compared to other protocols.
So I have a slightly differing view. I think we want to be able to do something with the money to potentially help generate the yields as well. And that might be a separate thing where we have a second thing which is a little bit riskier, but we can offer the yields. And just the other key point, and this comes down to governance, we want to be in a situation where you guys, the ANC token holders, can actually tell us what rates we should be setting for the next 6 months or 5 months or 3 months or whatever, and give you enough tools so you can basically see how we come up with those kind of things. So we're not just pulling a finger out and saying, today it's going to be 15, but let you have the tools and let you vote and let you basically figure out where the pros and cons are and what the consequences of having a higher versus a lower yield and all those kind of things. We want to basically be able to empower you guys, the ANC token holders, to do those kind of things as well, not just us in a back room, so to speak.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, from the perspective of the community member, if we could see basically how you determine what's feasible, the math that you use, the variables that you plug in, the various considerations, that would be super helpful. All right, let's go to the next question. A quick one. How big is the team now?
It's a small team of kind of 7 people. I think the biggest challenge when you asked about that is it's really hiring. It's hiring the best technical people, especially to address this market opportunity. So we want the best, obviously, smart contract engineers, researchers, and infrastructure people out there. That's like probably one pitch I would say is send your best, and if you feel like you fit into that bucket, please apply as well. These people are not easy to find. So yeah, I mean, team is small, but we'd like to basically get to a size that's double that by end of year, beginning of next year, because we've got big ideas and we want to implement them and we want to do it fast.
Cool. Yeah, that is super impressive. 7 people having built a protocol that now manages over $5 billion worth of assets. That's super cool. Cool. Moving on. Anchor is global. Do you see interest from all over the globe, or is there any region that stands out? I'm not sure. The person asking the question didn't specify if it's in terms of depositors or borrowers or stakers.
I don't think we keep statistics on where the people are coming in per se. I can say that we are a global team of developers. By the way, I did mention we are hiring, I think. We have people in Europe, Australia, Asia, and America all working on it. But as far as statistics on where users are coming in, we try not to keep that information. We have no need for it to run our protocol.
Got it.
And I'm seeing on the institutional side, if you start looking at fintechs and neobanks, et cetera, the interest is really global. I would say slightly skewing toward jurisdictions that have more regulatory clarity. So maybe it's Switzerland, maybe it's Southeast Asia, places where they feel like they can move a little bit faster and not have to worry about someone slapping them down too quickly. But that being said, there's a ton of U.S. interest as well. And some of it's discovery. Some of it's like, okay, what the hell do you guys do? And it's an education process, and they're trying to feel it out, and they're trying to say, hey, look, is this something I can actually take to my legal department? And, admittedly, a lot of people are not there yet for us to clear through legal and compliance by just the very obvious nature of what DeFi is. But, if you look at it from the lens of, okay, just non-DeFi, more mainstream type users, it's a pretty good cross-section. I'm getting inquiries from everywhere, really. Singapore, Japan, United States, Europe, Africa. Just it's literally everywhere. It's crazy.
Got it. Yeah, actually, sticking to that international aspect. The next question is about are there plans for the future to add currencies like EUT or Euro to the deposit side of Anchor? Perhaps Ryan?
I'll wait. If Ryan comes in, I'll let him talk. But it's one of the things that we're discussing. One of the challenges that we have when we talk about other currencies is the amount of volume coming through on those currencies. So in order for us to be a good system and have good liquidity, we need volume. So we've obviously discussed native versions of these things, and also having it so that you can exchange the currency as you go in. And these are one of the things that we're looking to the community to see. Is this super important to you? As in, is this something that you would like us to focus on or not? But the key challenge is we need liquidity in those currencies. And if you have a look at your staking rewards, most of the liquidity is in US dollars and Korean, whatever they're called, coming in. So we don't get much. If you have a look at your staking rewards, you don't get much Aussie dollars, or you don't get much Swedish krona coming through. So it's going to be very hard to build those kind of pools unless that changes. And hopefully Ryan's reconnecting, so hopefully when he comes back, he'll be able to add some more color on that.
Yeah, I think that's right. And the intention is to really broaden this to people everywhere. I think that sentiment's correct. Liquidity is a huge issue right now, but we're getting to a place where, I mean, certainly from a tech functionality perspective, it's something that we can implement probably fairly quickly. It's just a matter of practicality right now.
Ryan, you back with us?
Sorry, guys, had a bit of a connection issue.
Cool. It was about other currencies and basically native earn in other currencies.
Yeah, so going into a bit of technicals, like essentially if you try to enable anchored yield on other Terra stablecoins, such as the AUT, EUT, GBT, essentially what you have to do, what should be done is you build something very similar to an anchor on top of Anchor. Because if you think about it, what Anchor does, it reroutes of a volatile asset, in this case Luna, B Luna and B ETH, and then routes that over to a stablecoin deposit, UST deposit. And yeah, essentially what should be done is a similar structure on top where you route over the yield of UST over onto a different asset like AUT, EUT, and yeah, it's more like a replica. And since pretty much the mechanism is already out there, I believe there's like a very good opportunity for other people, third parties, external developers to jump on and develop protocols on top that really enable that.
Got it. All right. We made our way to the end of the master AMA thread. So let's now move on to the first of the threads with calls for ideas. So the first one is basically how to encourage more borrowing, because just to paint a little bit of a background here, the big selling point of Anchor is obviously the close to 20% depositor yield on UST on the stablecoin. But in order for that to be people need to borrow, and we've had periods when there was just not enough borrowing, and as a result, Terra decided to basically top up the yield reserve of Anchor with $70 million worth of UST to sustain Anchor for a little bit longer. Right now, Anchor is breaking even, but who knows what could happen in a bear market where people are a little bit less inclined to borrow. So the So what we need to figure out basically is how to make borrowing as useful and as easy as possible. And I was really happy to see the community come up with a lot of really great ideas in the thread. So yeah, let's just start going through them. And the first one is, many people mentioned adding more B assets as collateral, and everybody's been mentioning that. So I think it would be really cool to get a status update. I think B, ETH, bonded Ethereum went live sometime in August, and there's quite a lot of that in Anchor already. And then what's the status with new types of B assets being added?
Yeah, for that, we have quite a few things on the queue. And yeah, to be frank, our waiting point was on a availability of a token bridge between the other proof of stake chain that we'll be integrating with and the Terra blockchain. So essentially, we've been waiting for Wormhole to launch and have like a lot of documentation around it. But now that's prepared, a lot of development is already on the way. So yeah, if you check out Wormhole Bridge and if you also see which chains they're connected with, you can get a very good glimpse on what are the collaterals that are currently in development. And it's all about like just replicating the same structure for BETH and then having it on different proof of stake assets. So since we already went through the same development process and we are now confident that we are on the way of standardizing the development process there, further collateral additions will be much more straightforward. And it will be straightforward in a way that it does, at the end, it won't require our team, our development team's intervention for each of those developments. But instead, what would be done is there'll be proper documentation, there'll be all the example codes on how to create a B asset of your own, whether it's for a proof of stake asset or whether it's some different yield bearing asset. Well, I'd say the yield should be from like a very fundamental source, as fundamental as proof of stake. But yeah, at the end, we'll be providing all the documentation and the governance procedures to allow anyone to build their own B asset and whitelist them. And aside from that, there's two different collaterals, two different B asset collaterals that are currently in development. And just by seeing Wormhole and who they integrated with, you can get a very good idea of it.
Yeah, and the key point that Ryan mentioned is we want to get out of the business of doing integrations. We want to make it as easy as possible for other groups to do that. So then instead of having to do 300 different calls doing that, we're building better documentation, build better examples so that others can just take that and just run themselves. And coming back to the governance component, as Ryan mentioned, we also don't want to be seen as some mysterious gatekeeper. You get to pass, you don't. This is something that we want to give the tools and the information to the governance people, the token holders, so they get to choose and they can get to make decisions. At the end of the day, it's their money, not ours. So we're trying to basically enable them to make better choices, allow them to figure out, I want B XYZ because it's cool, or B Dogecoin is the best thing possible. Let's go and add that in there. And if they wants to, then who are we to say no?
That sounds good, super cool. Just to understand better, so everybody will be able to basically propose B assets, but then a governance vote basically will be still required in order to apply those as actual collateral in Anchor. Is that correct?
Yeah, because just because I want B Doge as collateral doesn't mean it should be happening. And there's a lot of different things that need to be looked at when you use something as collateral, and these are the things we need to be careful of, because if we go and create some token which has zero value and people lend against it, that token disappears, then somebody's ended up paying for the bill, and that's the ANC token holders. So you can't just enable everything. There has to be some thought behind it.
Got it. Yeah, that sounds good. And then do you already have like maybe some ETAs for the next B assets when proposals could be going live?
Sure, of course. Let me just give you some promised dates so that we can hang ourselves. No, I don't think we have dates. And to be frank, most of the dates are not. We're not. It's not dependent on us. It's other teams using these things and when they're ready. So I don't think it'd be really fair for me to basically put another team on the hook for delivering something when it's their responsibility and it's their team doing it. So I don't think we should be giving out dates. But again, Matt and Ryan can overrule me on that.
I would say, yeah, I kind of echo that. I wouldn't give an exact date for some of this stuff, like BSOL, obviously, is one that people are anxiously awaiting. So I get it, like, and it's been floating out there for a long time, and it is kind of frustrating when you have some dependencies, Wormhole being one of them. But look, I mean, and then there's audit processes. Like the fact of the matter is, there's these auditors are basically booked out till June. But we're not. Like we have been talking to them for a while, so we are all queued up and prioritized. But again, it's there are third parties that need to do their jobs so that we're releasing the most, kind of comprehensive, secure products out there. So Ryan may have a better idea in terms of granular date range. I kind of know what they are, but I don't want to overspeak and put anybody on the spot necessarily.
Yeah, so I won't be providing right now, but rest assured, there'll be a roadmap document that we'll be releasing pretty soon. We're just making the final polishes, and we're also trying to implement the community feedback from the AMA today. And that roadmap document would have a very good timeline on what things will be implemented at what time. And yeah, get excited for that.
Yep, that sounds super interesting. Cool. Moving on to the next question related to the borrowing side. It's about the UX basically of borrowing. So right now, assuming I have some Ethereum, let's say on the some Ether on the Ethereum blockchain, and I want to borrow with that as collateral, I need to somehow bridge over the blockchain, get bonded Ethereum, provide that as collateral, and only then I can borrow. So there's quite a lot of steps, quite a lot of setup that needs to happen. And somebody that's maybe not really familiar with all these technical aspects might not be willing to do it. So the idea is, can all of that somehow be simplified? Can all of these steps be abstracted into like one smart contract call? What would it actually take?
So it's a challenge. It's not necessarily user interface, but there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of different groups. So, for example, how it works on Ethereum might be different from how it works on Solana. As somebody mentioned, BSOL already. So there's a lot of stuff in there, but we hear that it's difficult and or it's challenging, and we need to work better. We're hearing that message, and we'll hopefully come up with some other ways of doing it. But it's not. You have to remember that some are not us. It's not like an anchor team who owns all these things. It's collaborations with different groups, and that's the other challenging part.
So for that, I do have a bit of detail to add. So before going into all of that, interchain applications, I think that concept is very interesting. And it didn't really exist until we launched Ethanker and BETH. So, okay, for example, there are a couple of DeFi applications on top of Ethereum that also deploy their contracts to other chains. But the issue, but the thing is that you had to transfer over the tokens over to that chain, and then you could interact, make smart contract calls on top of those chains. But I think the future will be different. Like if you were in crypto like back in 2017, 2018, where there was a lot of argument around the fat protocol thesis, and just observing how things have evolved since then, I'm pretty sure that's not going to be the case. So instead, what we're seeing is we are seeing a lot of layer ones popping up aside from Ethereum. And we're also seeing a lot of layer twos popping up on top of Ethereum. So at the end, well, let's be frank. Like users don't really care which blockchain the application is built on top of. What they care is what blockchain their assets lie on top of. So I think we really hit a milestone in protocol development by launching eThinker, because if you're using eThinker and if you're trying to deposit ERC20 UST or ERC20 USDT, USDC into Anchor, you don't really need to have an understanding of the Terra blockchain or the Anchor smart contracts. What you need to care is send those tokens to a specific Ethereum contract, make the relevant smart contract calls, and the infrastructure will take care of the rest. So my belief is that it's going to get generalized to every single application. So it could be in a way that if you're holding BETH tokens on top of Ethereum, there will be no more cross-chain transfers, no more headaches around that. Instead, there'll be a Ether contract where by sending your BETH tokens and making a smart contract call, let's say lock collateral, and then the infrastructure will deposit that collateral over into Anchor and the collateralized position on the Terra side Anchor smart contracts. So with that vision, like, yeah, I think a lot of people would get how things would be and how development would be focused around that. So yeah, just putting up some notes over there.
And if someone wants to learn more about ETH Anchor, there is a page about that in the Anchor documentation.
Yeah, and we're working very heavily on making that better, and hopefully we'll have some great news on there. I don't know if everybody's met Evan, but he's working diligently on that, and he's giving me shit on Twitter, so fair play. He's basically building it the down there, and it'll be good.
Sounds good. All right, the next question is about fintech/neobank apps built on top of Anchor that would also facilitate borrowing and not just deposits and savings. Is something like that already in development? Do you guys know of a business that's doing that? What do you think about that?
I mean, I think it's a thing that we have had on our radar for a while now. There's a proliferation of really cool apps. Alice Cotta, there's Yoda, there's lots of really innovative stuff happening on the deposit side, and it's very UX friendly. And there's companies we've invested in, partnered with, like Outlet Finance, that are basically these front end type wallets that a user can kind of plug into and start earning that 18 to 20% APY. And it's a relatively simple interface. I think it's easy to understand, and there's people building on top, and I think there's a proliferation of them, and I think you're going to continue to see tons of that sort of activity, and then there'll be some consolidation over time. I think the borrower side, I think the persona is a little bit different of people who are working on the borrower side. They're a little bit more sophisticated, I'd say, a little bit more native. So yes, there are a couple tiny projects that I've seen that are working on something like this, but I very much encourage. I saw an idea on the forum, basically request for startup or request for project to be built on Anchor. And when we look at hackathons, actually like 5, 6 out of 10 projects are actively looking to build on top of Anchor. That's one of them. We have neobanks in general that should be building on top of us in a really kind of fun UX way. And then the borrow side, yeah, it's a little bit trickier, but it's underserved. And if we can kind of figure out ways to partner with people in the ecosystem and beyond, to facilitate that, I think that's a huge win. I think people kind of went after the low-hanging fruit, which was the deposit side. But if anybody's out there and has seen or is working on something like this on the borrow side to encourage borrowing, to make it easier, a different kind of front end where you can access the goodness on Anchor Borrow, feel free to connect us, because I think that is something that should actively be pursued, and I think that's like design space for people to go and start building.
Got it. And then, yeah, speaking of actually the use case of both, the savings side, the deposit side is promoted. It's being promoted actually much more actively than the borrowing side by pretty much everybody in the Anchor ecosystem. But could borrowing be actually promoted more? Like, what are the main use cases that people tend to use borrowing for these days, and what else they could be using for? What could the pitch for borrowing be? And is it possible to amplify it way more than it currently is being amplified?
I mean, I think that's a really fair piece of feedback. I think it's exactly right. I think if you look at mainstream media, people on Twitter talks about the kind of 18 to 20% APY, and the APR kind of gets ignored. Crazy that you can actually get paid to borrow, although we're trying to obviously wean down the inflation on the ANC token side. But the mechanics of the borrowing and the fact that it is so amazing, to be able to access UST in that way is kind of mind-boggling. So I think it's a very fair point that we should be talking about that more. And I'll say kind of the obvious thing here, which is, we need more and more use cases for UST. I think after Columbus 5, you're seeing just a ton of really cool protocols being built that are going to be like more black holes for UST. We don't want 90% of people to come in and just borrow to speculate. We need true organic use cases that create demand for UST. And that also kind of allows us to slow ANC inflation, because you're on Anchor Borrow to access UST, and its use case is not just collect and sell ANC tokens. So I think there's that added benefit as well. But I think that's a really smart point, that we need to kind of espouse that a little bit more.
Yes. Okay. Right now, there's 3 different types of users that borrow from Anchor Protocol, or at least in my mind. So number 1, there's people that want to farm ANC tokens, so they borrow. That was like the initial case when we first launched. I don't think a lot of people is just doing that these days. So moving on to number 2, there's people that borrow UST and purchase more Luna or purchase more other like proof of stake assets, basically getting a leveraged price exposure on those assets. So I think that's also a legitimate demand. And lastly, there's people that borrow UST and then use that UST on other protocols, redeploy the borrowed funds on other protocols, gain additional yield on top of it. Right now, I observe a lot of people are doing number 3. And yeah, so just to explain, okay, just to go into a bit more details, I know a lot of community members have brought up, like, what if borrow APR? What if the net APR goes negative? And a lot of people has mentioned concerns around that, but I myself don't really see that as a bad thing, because if you're able to borrow UST at a comparatively low APR compared to other protocols, and if you're able to deploy that borrowed funds to other protocols and then gain extra yield or provide liquidity or whatever you want over there, then that's a very good reason to borrow USD from Anchor. So even if net APR goes negative, those demands will still stay. So that's a bit about like the net APR going negative, but aside from all of that, I think what's very interesting is we can create a demand number 4, and that demand would not be about price or it won't be about yield farming. Instead, just by sharing a bit of the staking yield that Anchor collects over to borrowers, what borrowers can then do is to leverage on staking yield. And yeah, so instead of getting, for example, like 5% on BE staking rewards, you could be leveraging on that staking rewards to gain 7, 8%, maybe 10% instead. And yeah, that is one of the key thoughts I currently have in mind. And I believe by introducing that, it will also increase a lot of the borrowing demand. And yeah, it could really resolve a lot of those demand issues here.
That sounds super interesting. And actually, Ryan, if maybe you wrote a bit of a post on the forum, just outlining your idea. It doesn't have to be fully formed, completed, or whatever. It can be a bit of a brain dump where you currently stand. It will still be I'm sure the community would come up with feedback and some good ideas there. So yeah, if anyone in the community hasn't tried the borrowing side of Anchor, you should try it. Just watch your LTV. Don't go insane there. Anything else on borrowing, guys, or should we move on to the ANC token side?
So just the last thing about borrowing is right now, okay, like the initial concept of Anchor was to allow borrowing on yield-bearing collaterals. And by yield-bearing collaterals, it's not only about proof of stake rewards. There's other yield-bearing protocols. For example, I don't know, it could be LP tokens for fundamental pairs such as UST, USDC, and something around that line. And by having a difference, like for example, if you think about it, like stablecoin swap demand within a blockchain economy, that's like one of the most basic economic factors. And by Anchor plugging into those yield sources, things will get much more interesting, and a lot of scalability efforts could be focused around that too.
Yep, sounds good. Okay, so these were the ideas from the borrowing thread, that call for ideas. Let's move on to the other one, and the other is basically how to increase the value of the ANC token, which ever since launch it has gone up and down, but it's the anchor's value locked is going up. ANC value is not really going up with the same pace. It's sort of staying flat for the most part for the last few months. So the idea in the thread was basically how to increase the value of that token, and the purpose of that is not just so that everybody can get rich and ANC to the moon, but also because ANC is of course a crucial incentive for borrowers in Anchor. Certainly is responsible for a lot of borrowing, which in turn means that Anchor can pay a high yield to depositors. So if the ANC token value goes up, then everybody should benefit. So the first idea there is around borrower tiers based on how much they have staked, how much the person borrowing has, how much ANC they have staked. So basically, the idea is that the more ANC you hold, the better borrowing rate you can get when you borrow from Anchor. So, and then the alternative to that is maybe once BANC gets introduced, maybe there could be a requirement for there to be like a small percentage of collateral in BANC in order for someone to be able to borrow. So it's actually maybe a little bit complicated. So maybe let's start with the first part, which is should people that have more ANC staked have a borrower interest rate? Matt, I can see you unmuted yourself. What do you think?
I think it's a really an interesting idea, and it kind of borrows from some of these TradFi best practices or things that have been in place for years. So it definitely kind of falls into this kind of more mature product scope that we're kind of trying to get to. And so to me, this kind of stuff comes down to implementability. I think, and in fact, a lot of these different proposals to grow ANC value are really, really interesting. And it comes down to how quickly can we kind of get it going, and like, does it break anything else? I think in general, it's a pretty interesting idea. I'd be interested to hear, what Ryan and Ian think, but I think it's certainly along the track of, getting to a place where we were talking a little bit earlier about yield curves and building these things out on the borrow and deposit side, where, it may make sense to do stuff like this. Like the fact that you can have instant liquidity on like on a deposit side, the fact that there isn't a lot of kind of tiered or any tiered borrowing, it makes things a little bit dicey when there's a ton of volatility. So I'm always kind of, without overcomplicating the message and without diluting what we're kind of doing, is to create differentiation. And I think this is kind of one way to look at it. But Ryan and Ian, weigh in.
Okay, so the key thing here is everybody wants ANC to go up, right? Everyone would love that. But the key thing is we're a new protocol. I think we've been at it for 6 months. What my focus is let's get the experience working first. Let's make it the best place to take a loan. Let's make the best place to actually get yield. Let's focus on the core things that we do first, and then we can focus on how do we do different things. And yeah, I mean, the discussion of requiring ANC to do different things and have different yield rates for those things, great. And we should look at those, and we are looking at those kind of things. The other thing is I put some proposals up around governance. The main thing there is, can we actually get people to actually help us do the governance as well? And the fundamental thing about ANC is we have to give a reason for people to hold it and people to want to hold it. And we're working on different avenues to do that. And the first thing that we want is fundamentally, if you want to actually participate in the direction of the protocol, you'll need to hold some of the things and be a token holder in that. So that's one of the key things we're looking at doing on the ANC go up thing. And yeah, definitely want it to go up, don't get me wrong, but the key focus here is let's make it a great thing first and then worry about how a token can go up afterwards.
Yep. Everyone, please go to the Anchor forum and check out Ian's proposals there.
Yeah, and Columbus 5 is a huge lift for everybody, and it slowed a bit of progress on features and tokenomics. We are definitely heads down on this. Yeah, I will say that, we need to source the best answers on this issue and kind of implement relatively quickly. I kind of slightly disagree a bit, or else we kind of risk alienating ANC holders and making them kind of become restless sellers. And I agree with the sentiment that like a strong token is a must, like for any strong protocol. Like it becomes a meme, it attracts attention, it attracts, protocol activity. And we've done just a shitload of great work on the protocol side. So having a token that doesn't reflect that or diverges from that is kind of not a great thing. So I think this one, we start with, we kind of propose, we work through this, we go back and assess what we can do short term. Like I'm talking about like coming weeks, not even months. Because it is imperative to me, like that people don't lose faith in ANC. Because it's a common outreach. Like, what are we doing here? I think it's got more upside than anything out there, and it's kind of a victim of first iteration tokenomics. And I do think we do need to take some measures here relatively quickly to address these things, because again, like I don't want this thing to kind of decouple from the performance of the protocol, and I want people on this call to get rich. I want this thing to kind of demonstrate the value that I think it can demonstrate. And you can use this thing as a currency in a lot of different ways. Like you can, there are just like we've got internal discussions going where it's like there's almost too many suggestions. So it's a matter of like whittling them down and going with the ones that have the most impact, are implementable without breaking things. But again, I do think we need to show the community that this is something we are actively caring about, because these are ANC token holders, and again, like they should be rewarded for using the protocol and borrowing and depositing. So that would be kind of a high level statement.
Sounds good. We go through some of the ideas mentioned. So one of them, Ryan made a in August mentioning this, and then many people brought it up. And I'll just read what Ryan wrote. So instead of having gated yield for ANC stakers, we could offer lower yield to smart contract-based depositors. And so if somebody deposits with a smart contract, they have less than 20%, and everybody else doing it manually has the full 20%. Is that something that's is sort of is still being considered, or what's the status on that?
Yes, it is still being considered. Although it does require a lot of the mechanism, like fixating on the mechanism, because it still has to be implemented, and in order to implement, we need a concrete mechanism behind it. So, like right now, our ideas are converging into something like this. Like if you're like a smart contract-based depositor, then either you require some contribution to ANC or the network to get the full yield and all the benefits, you will get a low yield, and the yield difference would instead be used by the protocol in the way of buybacks. It could be buybacks, it could be some other method that contributes to ANC. So that is like the current idea that's going on.
Got it. Sounds good. The other thing that lots of people mention is more exchange listings for ANC. What's the status there? Are there more listings coming?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is an exciting area. And it's one thing that's kind of held us back a little bit. UST, listing having primacy. UST ubiquity is really the name of the game for just everything in Terra ecosystem in general. But yeah, I think you're going to see a flurry of activity here before the end of the year even. Coinbase is going to be going native in November. And we'll just say that like the biggest exchanges out there are pretty imminent, and not just for UST, but for ANC. So as everybody knows, one of the big challenges has been exchange support and liquidity for ANC and UST bigger picture. We think that's going to be changing pretty quickly. It's very interesting. It's kind of dominoes. Once you get somebody like Coinbase interested in listing you quickly, all these exchanges all over the world kind of take notice and start paying attention and just kind of start listing you without filling out some long listing agreement. So I think we've got some real momentum there. I mean, ANC, look, ANC launched March 16th-ish. So it's not like it's been out there a ton of time with this like very long track record. So a lot of this is to be expected. Like, I think, MIR, a lot of that didn't get listed for 6 months-ish. I don't know what the magic number is, but we're kind of hitting that point now. And I think Coinbase was a great catalyst. And look, I think between now and the end of the year, you're going to be pleasantly surprised by some of these big name exchanges, listing us.
Yeah, and just to add to that point, what I'd really love to see on the exchanges is native ability to actually use Anchor. So you can deposit and take loans directly in the exchange. That would be amazing. Hopefully some of them are listening and taking notes now.
Yeah, I actually received a telegram 2 days ago from one such exchange with an earn product, and very, very interested in integrating and getting Anchor basically, built in, integrated into what they're doing. So there's lots of really cool stuff we can be doing. Anchor is a core financial primitive. It can theoretically be plugged into anything, anywhere there's pools of money sitting there. That's one of the things that attracted me to the place. The opportunities are just endless there, and yeah, I agree with Ian. I think once you start enabling exchange, it can be it can be a huge differentiator for these exchanges if they can offer an Anchor earn. I know Coinbase had a little bit of trouble there, but there are ways to do this.
There you go, Matt, dropping some alpha.
Exactly.
All right. One other idea that I guess has been discussed for months now is whether the demand pressure from a protocol for ANC could be increased. Right now, 10% of excess yield gets used to buy ANC from the market. So the excess yield is basically the profit that the protocol makes, and the rest goes to the yield reserve. And then at some point, Ryan suggested increasing 10% to 30%, and then obviously the protocol will be buying 3 times as much ANC from the market, so much higher buying pressure. And then Ryan also said that it's probably doable if bonded Ethereum allows for a net positive cash flow, and that post was in August. So now I guess we've had over 2 months to gauge where we are with that. Ryan, maybe what are your thoughts on increasing that parameter?
Yes. So for that, like the number one thing that should be first considered is whether Anchor is actually above break even, because like if Anchor is like below break even, if it's tapping into its yield reserve, but if people decide to increase the buyback ratio, then that does not really make sense economically. And so it's a matter of like getting more additional yield sources, like getting more protocol revenue from all those yield sources, or it could be in the form that deposit APY could be lowered, which will also make it above break even. But the thing is that like the parameters, they're controlled by governance, and there is already an interface out there on app.anchorprotocol.com that really makes up suggesting different parameters very simple. And it's not really up to us. Like we don't control governance. Like even if we think like there's a better number to like a certain parameter, all we can do is suggest to the community and ask for feedback. Maybe we could submit a governance proposal ourselves. But I would really like the community to more participate on putting up more better proposals, adjusting the parameters so that it's more capital efficient. Same goes for the buyback ratio.
Yep. Probably the Anchor forum is actually a great place for everybody to submit their ideas and get thoughtful feedback, hopefully from everyone. So both the other community members and the core team, we might hold you up to your 3-day SLAs.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I get beat up quite a bit over ANC price, as you can imagine, on Twitter, etc., in DMs. And it's like, hey, there is a forum there. We do have to activate it. We do need to energize it. We do need to have more participation from kind of Anchor core team members, myself probably top of the list, to be in these things and energizing discussions. But yeah, it's like, the forum's open. Put some stuff on there, and people will react to it. If you care about it, if you come up with a fully fleshed out proposal, it's going to absolutely get our attention, and we will again discuss feasibility, implementability. That's always a key thing, but it's it's there. It's there for a reason. You know, one of the big challenges is getting it more active and getting it more broad in participation. And that kind of means all of us need to do a little bit more, I think. But yeah, it's that's one of the funny things about these decentralized protocols. It's like, hey, if you want to, hey, go beat me up, that's great. But go write a proposal that we can implement, and then you can be a hero. It's great.
All right, everybody can be a hero here. Sounds good. I'm conscious that we're slowly running out of time. So one other question from me. I think Matthew already mentioned that it was suggested in the forum that it would be really cool to have some central place with basically requests for Anchor-based tools or apps slash dApps or resources, maybe some educational resources. And these would be basically requests for what you guys and what the community would like somebody to build on top of Anchor, something that's related to Anchor and something that basically a public good that benefits everybody in the ecosystem. And also, not sure that everybody knows about that, but there's a big community fund, and everybody can apply for funding from that fund. So maybe that central place with requests could also pretty much imply that something like this is likely to get funded. So some source of inspiration for people that want to contribute. Is that something that you might be built at some point?
Yeah, I like that idea. Yeah, I think Wise said something similar to that. As I mentioned before, WagMe, who's on our team, runs hackathons, etc. And to 6 out of 10 of these ideas that are generated or projects that he's seeing want to build on top of Anchor specifically. So Anchor's a platform on top of a platform because it's such fertile ground and is such a core financial primitive. So yeah, I do. I think it makes sense to really streamline this, have a centralized place where people can come, and we can also be pretty explicit about what we think the priorities are, and have somewhat steer in the right direction, but we don't have ownership over all the good ideas. And sometimes you see stuff that is just wacko and awesome. Payroll is something I see all the time, continuous payroll. I've met 3 or 4 companies in the last month and a half that are doing really cool stuff like this. But yeah, some of that stuff's kind of opaque, right? It's happening behind the scenes. I think having a page where it's very easy to just drop in your ideas and people can see the activity and people can see up votes, down arguments, debates in a kind of centralized place that we all point to with links, etc. I like that a lot. That idea makes sense to me. It certainly worked for Y Combinator.
Yeah, I mean, we can also have like a form, like a template form saying, here are a set of 6 questions that normally get asked, put some thought on these 6 questions just to make it easier for people to say yes to you. So you think you got the right answers, or you've been asked the right question, you got the right answers in there off the gate, and that way WagMe and the co can easily say yes and give you money.
Got it. Well, guys, thanks a lot for answering all these questions, sharing all the alpha. I think we covered a lot of ground. I did my best to basically gather all of the ideas from the threads, and hopefully, the community got a good opportunity here to hear your perspective on all of that. Are there any final words from each of you?
I would just say, from my perspective, I think Ian, Ryan, and I, with the help of you, Camille, we take the most interesting suggestions raised today in the past few days and gauge which ones are kind of actionable, right? And we'll get back to the community within, call it 10 days with our thoughts. We'll put the best ideas up for a vote, and anything we move on, we'll give Reddits. And like I said, more broadly, we're putting SLAs in place where we will kind of within a week, at a minimum, acknowledge your posts and respond succinctly. We want our forums to be very highly engaging and a place where you can have open conversations with each other and us. So The goal here is broader and more inclusive governance, and we need proposals to be coming from everywhere. But again, I think that's where we want to get to. It's a really good kickoff, and I think having these in a regular cadence makes a lot of sense. So I'm very bullish. I think this is going to become very transparent and clear over time, and I think it's just going to generate the best ideas, and we're going to go build them.
Perfect. I can see that. Ian's back. No words from you, Ian. Are you with us? Not sure that he's with Brian.
I think Ian's currently at listener position. Probably need to upgrade him to speaker. But just dropping some final words. Unfortunately, due to time, wasn't able to share all of the ideas and the current developments. I think we only shared less than 10% of what's currently going on. So yeah, but we'll be having these discussions more ongoing, and there'll be a lot of discussions. There'll be a lot of ideas, a lot of new cool developments. So I think it's safe to say you guys could be excited about that.
Perfect. Ian, are you with us?
I think so. You gotta love technology. My Wi-Fi's dead. So yeah, leaving ports. Number one, we are hiring. Anybody's mentioned that yet? Just thought I'd just drop it in there just in case people forget. And number two, the second thing is we really want to hear from you. We really want governance and you guys to be in there. At the end of the day, we don't want to make decisions on this stuff. We firmly believe that ANC token holders are the right people to make decisions, and we want you guys to help us in that side, or us to help you make decisions, so that we can all the people using ANC come out with a great experience and get rich together, best possible way. And thirdly, just to not belabor the point, we're aware that there's, I think, 3 or 4 different AMAs or speaking spaces at the time. We promised to do better. We blame the intern for scheduling, because it's always his fault. And hopefully we'll do better and not schedule it on top of each other next time.
All right. Let's hope we can schedule better next time then. Perfect.
I'm not talking about
gentlemen.
you. I'm talking about the guy next to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Must be Brian. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining, and I hope that was useful to everyone, and we can perhaps do it again at some point.
Thanks, guys.
Sounds
Have a good one.
good.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot.
Have a good one.